Well, hello, this is Vincent Green, and we're going to continue in our study of the book of Isaiah. We're in Isaiah chapter 1. We're looking at this first sermon by Isaiah, and it starts in verse 2 of chapter 1, goes all the way down to verse 31. And as I've mentioned before, in the first 5 chapters, before we get to chapter 6, which is the historical account of Isaiah's call to ministry. But before we get to that, the book starts with 5 chapters that record 2 sermons from Isaiah. And chapter 1 is the first one, chapters 2 to 5 is the second one. It's a very lengthy sermon. And so sometimes I think I'm long-winded, but this is a very long sermon from chapters 2 to 5. And so we're going to be making our way through these 2 sermons, and I've told you that the historical framework for these sermons is, there's 2 aspects here. The historical framework is that it's during the time of Uzziah and Jotham, Uzziah's son, and how the people had become corrupt. And so these messages are, second aspect I want to mention is they're samples of all the kinds of sermons that Isaiah would preach. This is not probably the only time Isaiah preached, but it's similar in style to the Sermon on the Mount or in the Gospels, where we have only a couple of sermons by Jesus, but he preached regularly. And so did Isaiah. So did the prophets. And Isaiah ministered for over 60 years. That's a lot of sermons. That's a lot of ministry. And so what you get here is a sample, but it's what we need to hear. It gives us the information of what's happening in that time frame, what's going on in that generation, and what God has to say to them. And the message, even though given at a point in time, it's still timeless for us. And so it's very important that we see this. Let me read the first or verses 2 to 9. Go through verse 9 of this sermon, and because this sermon has 3 legs to it, 3 main points to it, and this one, verses 2 to 9, cover that first point. So let me just read this to you. Listen, O heavens, pay attention, earth. This is what the Lord says. The children I raised and cared for have rebelled against me. Even an ox knows its owner, and a donkey recognizes its master's care. But Israel doesn't know its master. My people don't recognize my care for them. Oh, what a sinful nation they are, loaded down with a burden of guilt. They are evil people, corrupt children who have rejected the Lord. They have despised the Holy One of Israel and turned their backs on him. Why do you continue to invite punishment? Must you rebel forever? Your head is injured and your heart is sick. You are battered from head to foot, covered with bruises and welts and infected wounds, without any soothing ointments or bandages. Your country lies in ruins and your towns are burned. Foreigners plunder your fields before your eyes and destroy everything they see. Beautiful Jerusalem stands abandoned like a watchman's shelter in a vineyard, like a lean-to in a cucumber field after the harvest, like a helpless city under siege. If the Lord of Heaven's armies had not spared a few of us, we would have been wiped out like Sodom and destroyed like Gomorrah. We're in this first sermon, and you can see the poetical language of it. You can hear the poetical language of what's being said here, what's being spoken here. And this sermon, like I said, has 3 main compartments to it, or 3 main divisions to it. This sermon's about condemnation. That's the essence of the phrase, listen, O heavens, pay attention, O earth, because the Lord has a message to speak. And it's a message of condemnation. It's a message of judgment. Even though he does offer hope throughout at different parts of this sermon, it's a message of condemnation for the sin of the people. But it's divided into 3 ways. There are three reasons why they are being condemned. And the first reason is rebellion. We saw this last time at the end of verse 2. The children I raised and cared for have rebelled against me. And I explained that phrase to you, that statement to you, and gave you the importance of that statement. The first leg of this sermon, the first reason why, is rebellion. And so starting in verse 3, going through verse 9, that is what Isaiah deals with, or the Lord through Isaiah deals with. He's condemning them because of their rebellion. Secondly, from verse 10 to 20, and we'll see this as we go, is empty religion. Empty religion. And the final reason is unfaithfulness, and that's verse 21 to verse 31. And so as we work our way through the sermon, going verse by verse, phrase by phrase, you'll see this develop. And so what I'm trying to do is in these sessions give you the nuggets and the details that are needed to know so that maybe you have an opportunity to share this passage with someone else. Maybe you're a pastor and you could preach through chapter 1 of Isaiah. And so you could have a sermon series through Isaiah chapter 1. I think eventually that's my goal, is to develop a good sermon series, maybe like an evangelistic sermon series, but you have to go through the text and understand it first. And that's why we're doing this in our Inductive Journey series. So we've gotten to verse 3, and what you see here, starting at verse 3, going through verse 8, technically verse 8, it breaks it down even more. If you want to understand if you want to ask the question, why are they being condemned for their rebellion? What does that rebellion look like? How does God describe their rebellion? That's what you have here. From verse 3 to 8, you have a description of rebellion. And so we're going to work our way through this. And today our goal is to work and just look at verse 3. Look at verse 3. Even an ox knows its owner, and a donkey recognizes its master's care, but Israel does not know its master. My people don't recognize my care for them. Wow. So let's walk through this. You can see that there is a comparison here, and that happens a lot with poetical language. So there's a comparison between an ox and a donkey compared to the people of Israel. And there's a contrasting, in a sense, comparison being made. It's a contrast because of the word but, B-U-T, that comes in the middle. So this would be two lines of text, and one would say one thing, but there's a contrast with the other. And so the point that's being made is in highlighting of this contrast. But there's a comparison being made from the animals of an ox and a donkey compared to the people of God. The nation of Judah, known here as my people and spoken of as the word of Israel, or the nation Israel. Even though the term Israel that's being used here, I don't think it's really referring to the northern kingdom, because this was a message that Isaiah was preaching to the southern kingdom. But there's a reason he does use the word Israel. There is a reason for that. But it's not in reference to the northern kingdom primarily, but there is a reference for that. So let's just walk through this. So even an ox knows its owner. A donkey recognizes its master's care. Think about an ox and a donkey. They would be animals that would have been created by God in Genesis 1. Ox and donkey. They were placed on earth, on this planet, by God to serve humanity. And then humanity would come after them. God made male and female, Genesis chapter 1, verse 28 to 30. And then when you get to Genesis 2, chapter 2, verse 19 and 20, Adam names all the animals. So he's the one that gives the name ox to the ox, donkey to the donkey. And Adam displays the intelligence that God gave him that's not possessed by the animals, because Adam and Eve were created in the image of God. And before Eve was brought into existence by God and brought to the man, Adam gave names to all of the animals. And then 1,656 years later, God brings one of every animal, pairs, sometimes multiples, to Noah to bring them into the ark. God's leading the animals there so that they can survive the coming judgment, so that when humanity is going to continue post-flood, those animals will come off the ark and repopulate the earth. Oxes and donkeys. The one thing about the ox and the donkey, they're not noted for their intelligence. They are not intelligent animals. They are animals that plod along. In Proverbs chapter 7, when you start at verse 21, it's talking about the deceiving woman, the manipulative woman, the seductive woman. And says, so she seduced him. Here's the seductive woman trying to seduce the man. This is a lot of Proverbs speaking this type of storyline in the first about 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs, to stay away from the evil woman, to stay away from the seductress. So she seduced him with her pretty speech. She enticed him with her flattery. And you know what he does? He followed her at once, like an ox going to the slaughter. He was like a stag caught in a trap. He was like a bird flying into a snare, little knowing it would cost him his life. So the ox and the donkey are not known to be that intelligent creatures. In fact, they're known as what we would say dumb animals. They don't have a large brain. They don't think for themselves like we do. So you can see the contrast here. When you go back to Genesis, you see that Adam and Eve are created in God's image. That sets them apart from the animals. God had a purpose for the animals. He has a purpose for humanity. God's the creator of all. And God made distinctions between the animals and humanity. God's not an environmentalist. He's not a tree hugger. God made distinctions between humanity and the animals. That is very clear. And so there's an irony being stated here. An ironic statement, if you want to call it that. You see, an ox and a donkey. They're pretty dumb animals when it comes to, they're not going to create software. They're not going to build you a bridge. They're not going to build you a skyscraper. They're not going to do that kind of thing. They are dumb animals that have been created by God to service humanity. But notice what the text says about them. The ox knows its owner. The ox may not be a bright intellectual creature, but the ox knows enough to know who the owner of that ox is. The word know means that he recognizes the relationship that he has, that animal, with the owner of the animal. Interesting word, owner. The ox doesn't rebel against the owner. The ox doesn't fight against the owner. The ox doesn't mind that he is a slave of the owner. Nope. He knows who its owner is. He understands the relationship. God has created the ox with the ability to be able to know that, to have that much knowledge. Animals do not possess a soul, but God has made the ox, which is beyond us, our full understanding of it, but God has made the ox to know its owner, to be able to recognize it. The donkey, similar situation. The donkey recognizes its master's care. So these are very similar statements, but they talk about two different things, or two different aspects to the one issue. So the ox knows the owner. That means knows the person of the owner, that knows the relationship, understands it, follows the owner, recognizes the owner. The donkey is highlighted here for recognizing the care that the owner or its master gives to it. The phrase master's care represents the place or location where the food is placed so that the donkey can feed itself to sustain its life. It has been built with, God has created these two animals that are being highlighted here to have the wherewithal to know who the owner is and to know that their owners care about them, to place food in a certain place where they can go and get it. And they can be nourished to do the tasks that they have been created to do. Nobody's has a problem here. Everything's working very well. And the idea of recognizes is it's consistent, it's present, it's recognition, constantly returns to the place where the owner provides the needed food. It keeps going back, keeps going back, keeps going back to where the owner puts the food. So it's a constant recognition. Recognizes, knows. These are present tense ideas, present tense type verbs. They know. They know. Even Jeremiah chapter 8 verse 7 says, even the stork that flies across the sky knows the time of her migration, as do the turtle dove, the swallow, and the crane. They all return at the proper time each year. So these animals are being highlighted. In Jeremiah, it looks to be birds, and here it looks to be animals that walk along the ground. And so the ox and the donkey. The point is they know who their owner is. They know where their owner puts food. They know that their owner cares for them, takes care of them. They recognize that. They acknowledge that in their own way. They can't speak words to acknowledge that, but they, by eating, by going there, by putting their face into the food and eating it, they're recognizing where their food comes from and who gives it to them. Isn't that interesting? This is just how God has designed it. This is how God has established it. This is how God has made it happen. So there's the owner himself, and then the care given by the owner, and that you can't divorce one from the other. Both are true. You have the owner and the owner's, the character of the owner, the person of the owner, and then you have the duty of the owner, the works of the owner, the acts of the owner, to take care of the ox, to take care of the donkey. So what's the contrast? But it says here, Israel doesn't know its master. My people don't recognize my care for them. Perfect analogy. Perfect contrast. Something very similar is said in that Jeremiah passage. Talks about the stork, it talks about the turtle dove, the swallow, and the crane, and that they return at the proper time each year. But then it says, but not my people. They do not know the Lord's laws. So they don't know to keep going back to the law of God, to the Word of God, and read it, and obey it, and follow it. Very similar type language. See, the analogy is a perfect analogy, even though it's a sad analogy. It's in reference to the owner represents the character of the Lord himself, that he is trustworthy. He is the master there when it says Israel doesn't know its master. Who's the master in reference to? What's God saying? This is God speaking. Who's its master? The Lord himself. That's clear. And they don't recognize my care for them. That speaks to the faithfulness of the Lord. They don't acknowledge who their God is, and they don't acknowledge the actions of their God. The contrast is very clear. The dull, plodding animals are more wiser than the people of Israel. And the people of Israel were created by God, just like Adam and Eve, in his image. Go to Psalm 139. David explains it. This shows you the extent of sin. It shows you the damage of sin. In their rebellion, God explains, tells the people exactly what their rebellion looks like. It starts with this. They fail to understand the character and the actions of the Lord. That's where this goes. That's where this starts. The two animals that are dumb, that have low intelligence when compared to humanity, know more than the people do. We want to know why the word Israel is used here? Because they represent the chosen people. That was their name before the division. So he's crying back. When the Lord uses the word Israel here, he's calling them back to history, to how they were created, how they were brought formed as a nation. Who brought them up? Who raised them? Who has cared for them? You see? It's going back to even to that statement in verse 2. Israel, the people of Israel, have come to the place where they don't know. If the chosen people know so little, how great must be the ignorance of those who are not even chosen. You see, the people of Israel were given God's law, given God's revelation to be a light to the rest of the world. Well, if Israel doesn't know, then the light's turned off. But God still works in the nations, as we will see. Israel doesn't know the source of her life. God himself, God's essence, His perfections. It's like when the Tower of Babel. It's like in the Tower of Babel, the people there had decided to throw God out, build a city without God there, because they wanted to create a society of people that would forget God and that would be raised up in a place where God wouldn't even be mentioned. No mention about the flood. No mention about God. That's what they wanted, a purely secular society. And the nation of Israel, nation of Judah, was getting to that same place. Rebellion was manifested by them in their darkened understanding, and the fact that it's like they were alienated from God. They were just like the unregenerate Gentiles, ignorant of God. You see, true knowledge of God comes from God alone. And God had revealed himself in his law and had given them the scriptures, but they didn't care to read. And there was no one there teaching the people. There was no one there taking the time to analyze the text, to study the text, to dig into the riches of the truth and see all the connections and see what God was saying in his word. There was no one telling them about Genesis 1 to 11. There was no one reading the book of Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy and explaining it to them. This was dark days spiritually. The truth was not being made known. The Lord himself is their master. The same kind of language is used in 2 Peter. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1, where it talks about these false teachers. It says, there were also false prophets in Israel, just as there will be false teachers among you. They will cleverly teach destructive heresies and even deny the master who bought them. Doesn't mean they're born again. It doesn't mean they're saved, but it's a reference back to God himself. But see, they don't believe in the master. The people of Israel, the people of Judah don't even know the master. They do not observe, they do not reflect upon who the Lord is. They do not weigh the biblical evidence of the Lord's existence. They don't think about creation. They don't think about all that who God is by what he has done. They don't go back and look at the crossing of the Red Sea that talks about the power of God. The people, you know what? People in Jericho, they knew, didn't they? They had heard that God had done a mighty deed. King Solomon, as far as we know, put up markers. He put up markers to show where they had crossed on one side and the other. And that was to be a great testimony to the faithfulness of God, to the character of God. Israel chose to forget all this. Israel chose to not care. The nation of Judah didn't care. Notice he extends, and it says, my people. He continues here, my people. And when you have in a Hebrew text, the first line in Hebrew is verb and then subject. That's normal. But when you have subject verb, there's an emphasis. And here we go. There's an emphasis. My people. It's usually verb first, then the subject. That's the order from right to left of how Hebrew is written. Here you have an emphasis. My people. They don't recognize. See, the animals, as you would expect, know the owner. But as for Israel, even my people, that means God is their master. God has made covenants with them. This is similar language to, or the similar idea to Romans chapter 9 at the beginning, where Paul talks about how the people of Israel were given the covenants. They were people of the covenants. They had a special relationship with the Lord God of heaven. They just do not know. You'll see this phrase, my people, over 23 times just in the book of Isaiah. It shows God's care for them. It's another way of stating that they're precious to me. And God always has His remnant, which we'll talk about as we work through this chapter. But generally speaking, the majority of the people who are walking through the broad way leading to destruction, these people are on that path because they don't recognize. So the idea of knowing is having instinctive knowledge of who your master is. Speaks to relationship. Recognition speaks to outward activities. It speaks to that they can discern, they can see that God is who He says He is by His words and by His actions, by His testimony. They do not engage in conscious reflection upon what God has done and upon what God has said. All they care about is their own interest, their own thing, their own selfish motives. And so they fail to understand the character and actions of the Lord. And His care for them, that's another slight preview of chapter 5, verses 1 to 7, which we'll look at when we get there in very great detail. But think of it this way. God had called them and brought them together as a nation, brought them out of Egypt, bring them to the promised land. You see God's electing love for His people, His sovereign love. And then He makes provision for them. Remember the manna? But they chose not to understand His grace, His mercy, His protection of them, redeeming them out of Egypt, saving them out of slavery. And so they did not recognize God's sovereign hand. They didn't reflect upon the truths of Scripture. They didn't reflect upon who their God is. And so rebellion at its heart is expressed with a failure to understand God, the character of God, the nature of God, who God is, and His actions, what He does. And how are you going to know that? How are we going to know that? By reading God's Word and studying it. And see, people who rebel against God have no desire in their heart to focus upon the Scriptures, to focus upon the Bible, and truly read it, to understand it. They have no desire. They may want emotion, they may want a feeling, but when it comes to reading Scripture, it's not there. And they really don't care to acknowledge who God is and what He truly has done. Nope. That's rebellion in the heart becoming manifest. Proverbs chapter 2, verse 5. My child, start with verse 1. Proverbs chapter 2. Listen to what I say. Treasure my commands. Tune your ears to wisdom and concentrate on understanding. Cry out for insight. Ask for understanding. Search for them as you would for silver. Seek them like hidden treasures. Then you will understand what it means to fear the Lord, and you will gain knowledge of God. Knowledge of God. Because the Lord grants wisdom. From His mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He grants a treasure of common sense to the honest. He is a shield to those who walk with integrity. He guards the path of the just and protects those who are faithful to Him. Hosea chapter 4, verse 1. Hear the word of the Lord, O people of Israel. The Lord has brought charges against you, saying, there is no faithfulness, no kindness, no knowledge of God in your land. You make vows and break them. You kill and steal and commit adultery. There is violence everywhere, one murder after another. That's why your land is in mourning and everyone is wasting away. Even the wild animals, the birds of the sky and the fish of the sea are disappearing. But don't point your finger at someone else and try to pass the blame. My complaint, you priests, is with you. So you will stumble in broad daylight, and you false prophets will fall with you in the night. Then I will destroy Israel, your mother. My people are being destroyed because they don't know me. Since your priests refuse to know me, I refuse to recognize you as my priests. Since you have forgotten the laws of your God, I will forget to bless your children. The more priests there are, the more they sin against me. They have exchanged the glory of God for the shame of idols. And so they forget God, the character of God, the essence of who God is, and they forget His actions, His deeds that show you His character. They both go together. You can't divorce one from the other. And that's the sign of their rebellion. It's a manifestation of their rebellion, and it's a reason why they're being condemned for their rebellion. Interesting, isn't it? Don't have a rebellious heart. The more you understand who God is, who the Lord is, the more you see that He is powerful and sovereign and Lord, the more humble you will become. Takes away all the rebellion. The Lord is sovereign in this world. No way to change that, and you shouldn't want to try to change it. You should want to believe it, accept it, embrace it, because our Lord who made us, who created us, who brought us into this world, has a plan in His Word for those of whom believe in Him. The plan for those who don't is that they will go into a Christless eternity, lake of fire. But for those who know Him and love Him, worship Him, they go to be with Him, absent in the body, present with the Lord. Don't rebel against the Lord. Know who He is. Know His deeds. They are mighty. Jesus came into this world to die on a cross, and He did, and He rose again. That was one of the greatest deeds ever. Know who the Lord is. Let's pray. Dear God, we do thank You again for this time to look at Your Word, to understand who You are, what You have done. Lord, there are those who do not care for You. They don't think about You. They don't meditate upon Your Word. But Lord, You say the one who is blessed is the one who delights in Your Word. Lord, what a privilege it is to know You, worship You, and adore You. And know that You are sovereign and that You are Lord and that You are God. There's nothing we do to earn any righteousness or any favors. We humbly submit to You, our Master, our Lord, our King, our God. Our life is in Your hands. That we know very well. May you receive all the glory and all the praise. And we give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're through verse 3. We'll continue on next time, looking at more of this wonderful text in the book of Isaiah, chapter 1. So we're going to dig deep here and walk through this sermon and begin to unveil it and examine it, understand it, so that we can apply it to our lives and let it change us day by day. So take care. God's blessings be upon you, and tell others about the series in Isaiah, the YouTube channel, all the other series and the playlists that are there, the classes and courses that are available, the videos they can watch. So just spread the word, but take care. May God's blessings be upon you, and we'll see you next time.